They say the desert keeps no secrets. I've learned that's a damn lie. Out here, everything hides something. Bones, gold, names, and men like me. I'm Elias Grant, bounty hunter. I don't ask who's guilty. I just bring 'em in, dead if it saves me time. The desert doesn't forgive men like me. It just lets us wander long enough to believe it might. The paper in my pocket said Silas Reed, accused of murdering Sheriff Clay of Bisbee. $500 alive. Half that if you ain't. Money's money, and in a place where mercy costs extra, it's the only truth that still buys bread. I'd been tracking him for 11 days. Hot days, colder nights, nights where the stars look close enough to burn you. And the whiskey don't taste like anything anymore. That morning, the wind changed, carried something with it. Not campfire smoke, older, heavier, the kind that clings to your coat and don't let go. I followed it north, through the dry hills and coyote tracks, until the horizon started to move. Dust. And behind the dust, rooftops. That's when I saw it. A small town half swallowed by the desert. Dry Creek. A place I'd never heard of, and one I probably should have left alone. My horse slowed without me telling him to. Even the air felt different there. Thicker, like it was waiting for something. And though I didn't know it yet, that trail of smoke was leading me straight into the kind of trouble a man don't ride away from. Dry Creek looked alive from a distance. Smoke curling from chimneys, horses tied outside the saloon, a few men hauling barrels across the street. But something about it felt wrong, like the town was breathing slow, hoping I wouldn't notice. As I rode down the main road, conversation stopped. Doors half closed. A woman pulled her child inside without a word. I'd seen towns like that before, places where the law had died, but no one dared to bury it. The saloon had its windows shuttered. No music, no laughter, just the sound of the wind dragging dust across the boards. I passed the sheriff's office. The badge was still nailed to the door, sun-bleached, cracked like the man who wore it had left. But the memory refused to go. Every step my horse took echoed too loud. Every shadow watched back. That kind of silence isn't peace. It's warning. At the far end of town, near the well, I saw her. A woman standing still, hands crossed, watching me like she'd been expecting someone. But didn't much care who it was. No fear in her eyes. No welcome either. Just calm, the dangerous kind. When I got close, she said, "You're looking for someone." "A man named Reed," I told her. She nodded once. "Then you'd better come inside. Before the others start thinking you found him." I tied my horse by the post and followed her in. The door shut behind me with a sound. That felt more like a verdict than a welcome. Inside smelled of coffee and kerosene. One lamp, one chair, no husband. The name Martha Clay hung in my head, long before she said it loud. And though I didn't know her story yet, something in that house told me. It was about to become mine, too. Inside the house, the air felt different. Not dirty, just lived in. The kind of place where time doesn't move unless it has to. The smell of kerosene mixed with coffee and old dust. A chair rocked slow near the fireplace, but no one sat in it. Everything in that room looked like it had a story, and none of them wanted to be told. She poured the coffee without asking if I wanted it. The sound of it filled the silence better than words. Her hands didn't shake, but her eyes did. I've seen that kind of quiet before, the kind that ain't peace, just exhaustion. She said her name was Martha Clay, and that her husband had been the law around here. I didn't tell her I already knew that. Didn't seem polite to mention I was hunting the man accused of killing him. Her tone was even, rehearsed. Like she told that same story to too many strangers, hoping one of them might stop asking questions. I noticed the badge first, hung above the doorway, clean as the day it was forged. No dust, no rust, just waiting. The photograph beside it showed a man with a proud jaw and a cruel smile, the kind of face that made you wonder who he'd hurt to earn that look. She caught me staring. "He used to believe in order," she said. Her voice cracked just enough to sound human. After a while, he believed in himself more. We sat across from each other, the fire crackling between us like it had something to say. I asked about Reed. She said she hadn't seen him in weeks. Her eyes said otherwise. When I mentioned Bisbee, she looked down at her hands and whispered, "There's no justice left there, only habits." That line stuck with me. The way people talk when they've already chosen sides, even if they don't know it yet. Outside, the wind began to rise. Boards creaked, horses stirred. Somewhere far away, a dog barked once and then stopped. She stood, picked up a lamp, and said, "There's a room upstairs. You can stay till morning. But whatever you're chasing, mister, you won't find it here." I didn't answer, just watched her disappear up the stairs and stared into the fire. The flame hissed and snapped, and for a second, I thought I saw two shadows instead of one. The wind wouldn't quit that night. It clawed at the windows, rattled the shutters like it wanted to get in. I tried to sleep, but the kind of silence inside that house doesn't let a man rest easy. Every floorboard had a memory. Every whisper of wood sounded like someone breathing. When I finally opened my eyes, the fire downstairs had burned low, but I could still smell smoke. Not from the hearth, from outside. I stepped out onto the porch. Cold air, empty yard, then a flicker of light. Behind the barn, too dim for a lantern, too steady for a fire. My hand went to the Colt without thinking. Old habits don't need reasons. The dirt was soft under my boots, and there, in the half-light of the moon, I saw them. Footprints, fresh. 2 sets, one small, and one that didn't belong to a woman. By the barn wall leaned a shovel, its blade half buried in damp earth. The ground beside it was turned and pressed down, like something had been buried, and the desert was trying to hide it. I knelt, touched the soil, still warm, still breathing. I dug up enough graves in my time to know when the dirt wasn't ready to rest. When I came back to the house, the door was open, just a crack, like someone had been watching me and didn't care to hide it any more. Inside, the fire was out, but the chair by the window was rocking slow, like it had been recently left. Martha stood near the stairs, her face half in shadow, half in lamplight. "You shouldn't be out there," she said. "Bad things don't like to stay buried." I didn't answer. Didn't need to. We both knew I'd found something. She wished I hadn't. I told her about the footprints. She didn't deny it. Didn't even look surprised. Instead, she said, "Maybe you should ride back to Bisbee. Tell him you didn't find Reed. Tell him nothing worth finding's left here." I stared at her, trying to see where the lie ended and the truth began. But all I found was that same calm, the kind people wear when they've already made peace with their ghosts. The dawn came gray and slow. Smoke from the night still hung in the rafters, thin as regret. Martha moved quietly, pouring water into the basin, her every motion too careful, like someone pretending to live a normal morning. I watched her in silence. She knew I'd been outside, knew what I'd seen, but she didn't seem afraid. That's what bothered me most, like fear was something she'd already spent long ago. Over coffee, I brought his name up again, not to ask, to remind her I hadn't forgotten. She didn't blink, didn't act surprised. Instead, she said, "You think you're the first to come here asking for him?" I didn't answer. She smiled, not kind, not cruel, just tired. The law sends a new man every few weeks. They all ride away thinking they're closer to the truth. They're not. I told her I'd found fresh dirt behind the barn. That's when her hand froze halfway to her cup. She stood up, went to the window, and spoke without turning round. "Silas Reed didn't kill my husband. The words landed like bullets. I waited for the lie that always comes after. It never came. She looked back, eyes dry and steady. I did. The room went still. The only sound left was the wind, sliding under the door. She told it plain. How Sheriff Clay ruled the town with fear. How he'd turned Bisbee into a place where guilt was just another currency. He wore the law like armor, she said, but underneath he was rot. The night she killed him, there were no screams, no fight, just a single shot, and a long walk to the barn. Silas helped her bury him. He begged her to run. She didn't. Said the town needed to believe. Someone still deserved to live there. When she finished, she didn't cry, didn't beg, just looked at me, the man paid to hunt ghosts and drag them into daylight. You came here for Silas Reed, she said, but you found the truth instead. So what's that worth to a man like you? I didn't answer, because I didn't know, and for the first time in a long while, the law felt smaller than the woman, standing in front of me. The morning came too still, the kind of quiet that don't belong to peace. Even the birds kept their distance. Martha was outside, hanging a sheet on the line, and I was saddling my horse, trying to decide if I'd seen enough to ride away. Then it came, that sound the desert never forgets. Hooves, slow, steady, heavy. Men who'd ridden too long to be friendly. I turned toward the ridge. Dust was moving there. 12 riders, no colors, no mercy. I knew that look. Bisbee men, old deputies who'd traded the badge for blood. They were Clay's boys once, the sheriff's personal storm. Now they hunted in his name, because vengeance is easier to carry than guilt. Martha saw them too, didn't flinch, just said they finally remembered where the devil used to sleep. And then she walked inside, calm as a prayer, said too late. I could have left. No one would have blamed me. A dozen armed men against a half-dead woman, and a bounty hunter with too much pride. But something in me stayed. Not courage, not pity, just the feeling that leaving her behind would make me part of whatever killed this town. So I loaded the rifle, checked the chamber twice, and waited. When the riders reached the well, their leader called out. Said they were looking for Martha Clay and the man who'd helped her bury a sheriff. I stepped out first, told them there was no one here but me. That was my first lie that morning, and the last chance I had to walk away clean. They didn't buy it. Men like that never do. Their hands went to their belts. The wind stopped, and for a moment the desert forgot how to breathe. The first gun fired before I could count to 2. A window shattered behind me. The barn door screamed open in the wind. Martha shouted from inside, "Get down!" And the world turned to thunder. Bullets tore through the porch posts. Splinters flew like hail. Smoke and dust rose together, and somewhere in the chaos I realized I was fighting for a woman. I was supposed to turn in. That's when I stopped caring about the bounty, because by the time the smoke cleared, this was no longer about law, it was survival. The gunfire stopped as sudden as it began. Smoke hung in the air like a curtain. The riders outside pulled back to reload, and the world went still again. The kind of still that only comes when death's trying to remember your name. I checked the rifle, half a magazine left. One breath to decide if I'd use it. Then I heard it, footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate, too heavy to be hers. I turned, and there he was, Silas Reed, the man I'd been chasing for 12 days, stood right there in the doorway, hat low, shirt torn, eyes dark as burnt oak. He didn't reach for a gun. Didn't need to. The weight of his voice was weapon enough. So, Bisbee finally sent the dog after me, he said. Or are you hunting for yourself this time, bounty man? I told him I didn't care what story he thought he was in. He laughed once, dry and tired. You think I killed the sheriff? He said. Clay was already rotting. Martha just helped him fall. He stepped closer, and for the first time I saw what the desert had done to him. Eyes hollow, skin burned raw, but still carrying that look of a man who once believed in something. She buried the law that night, he said, and you've been chasing the ghost of it ever since. Outside, horses snorted and men shouted. The riders were circling the barn, closing in. Martha appeared at the stairwell, rifle in her hands, her face pale but steady. Silas looked at her once. Not anger, not love, just two people bound by the same sin. Then he turned to me. "You gonna turn her in?" he asked. "Or shoot your way through 12 men for a truth you can't sell?" I didn't answer. Couldn't, because both choices led to the same grave. The first shot came through the window, then another. Glass burst, lamps fell, and fire found the kerosene on the floor. Silas grabbed a rifle and shouted, "Get her out!" Martha screamed his name, but it was too late. By the time I pulled her through the back door, he was already firing into the smoke, facing down the law he never broke. That night, the flames rose over Dry Creek, and the outlaw's words burned deeper than the bullets ever could. The riders spread out across the street. Dust rolled over the rooftops like a wave about to break. No one spoke, not them, not us, only the creak of leather and the slow breath before killing starts. Inside the house, the lamps were dimmed. Martha checked her rifle, calm as prayer. I could see her hands steady, mine weren't. That kind of silence only ends one way, and it always ends loud. The window burst before I heard the gun. Glass, smoke, splinters. I hit the floor, dragging Martha behind the table. Another bullet screamed past, the air filled with gunpowder and fear. Outside, someone shouted, "For the sheriff!" A lie that sounded too righteous to die quietly. I leaned out the window and fired once. One man dropped. The others ducked behind the troughs. 11 left. Too many for one conscience. A bullet hit the lamp. Oil spilled, flames leapt. The curtains caught first, then the shelves. Martha cursed under her breath, grabbing the bucket. Too late. Fire crawled up the wall like it was hungry. We ran to the back room. Heat chased us like judgment. The smoke made it hard to see, harder to think. She coughed once and said, "They'll burn us out before they face us." I answered, "Then we burn with them." Someone kicked the front door. Wood cracked. I fired blind. He fell halfway through the frame. The smell of blood and ash mixed in the air. Martha's eyes caught mine through the haze. There wasn't fear there, just certainty. "This house was built by lies," she said. "Maybe it's right it dies this way." Before I could answer, another volley tore through the walls. The fire roared and the world turned red. We ran for the back. The barn door stood open, moonlight bleeding through the smoke. I heard a voice behind us. Silas Reed. "Go," he shouted. "I'll keep them busy." He grabbed a rifle from the ground and stepped back into the fire. Martha tried to follow, but I caught her arm. "Not this time," I said. We stumbled out into the night, the heat on our backs, the sound of gunfire fading into the crackle of wood. And as we ran into the dark, Dry Creek began to burn, like a confession no one could take back. We ran through the back lot, past the burning shed, past the smell of horses and ash. Behind us, the house groaned, timbers breaking under the heat. The flames painted the desert gold, and in that glow, Silas Reed looked like a man walking into judgment. He turned once, rifle in hand, and shouted, "Get her out of here!" I wanted to argue, didn't. Some men already know how they're meant to die. He took cover by the well, the rifle braced on a broken post. When the riders came through the smoke, he didn't hide. First shot, clean. Second, cleaner. Third, hit one in the throat. The others scattered, but Reed didn't stop. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to make it mean something. I'd seen brave men before, none that calm. From behind the rocks, I fired to cover him. Didn't matter. There were too many. Bullets tore through the air like hornets. One hit the post beside him. Another found his shoulder. He didn't even flinch. He shouted toward the fire, "Tell her it's done," then kept shooting, each pull slower, each breath shorter. When he finally dropped to his knees, the rifle slipped from his hand, but the smoke kept rising, like it refused to let him fall alone. I pulled Martha behind the ridge. She fought me the whole way, screaming his name until her voice broke. When the gunfire stopped, she went quiet, a kind of quiet that doesn't end. We sat there, listening to the fire eat what was left of Dry Creek. The heat burned our faces, the smell of death and justice mixing in the wind. And for the first time, I couldn't tell one from the other. When dawn came, the flames had died. Only smoke remained, curling into the pale sky like prayers that never got heard. We buried what we could find near the well. No names, no markers. The desert doesn't need them. Martha stood over the fresh dirt, her hands stained with soot, her eyes with something worse. She didn't cry. She just said, "He died, trying to prove the truth mattered." I wanted to tell her it did, but the wind blew first and carried that lie away before I could speak. We rode until the ground stopped burning. The horse stumbled twice before I let him rest. Behind us, Dry Creek was still a red glow in the dark, a wound in the desert that wouldn't close. Martha could barely stay upright. Blood marked her side through the torn dress. I caught her before she fell, laid her down beneath a mesquite tree. The night was quiet again, too quiet. The kind that makes you hear your own sins echo. I tore the fabric, cleaned what I could with water that tasted like iron. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. "Not deep," I said. She smiled faintly. "Guess death changed its mind." I wrapped her wound in silence, the kind that says more than comfort ever could. Her breath slowed, her eyes on the stars like she was trying to find something that hadn't burned yet. When she could speak, she asked if I hated her. I told her I didn't have that kind of luxury anymore. She said the sheriff's badge still hung in her house, because part of her still believed in what it meant, just not in the man who wore it. "I killed him because no one else would," she said. "It wasn't courage. It was exhaustion." Her words didn't tremble. They just settled in the air, and somehow they felt heavier than the gun I carried. The moon climbed higher. Her face looked pale in the silver light, and for a moment I saw her not as the widow or the killer, just someone too tired to lie anymore. I told her about the men I'd hunted, how every name I crossed off the ledger left me emptier than before. She said softly, "You're not chasing men, you're chasing reasons." That one hit deeper than any bullet. The wind turned cold. I built a small fire, just enough to keep the coyotes away. Martha drifted to sleep, her hand still clutching the badge she'd once hated. I watched the flames and thought of Reed, the man I came to kill, the one who died proving her right. By the time the moon began to fade, I knew morning wouldn't bring peace. It would bring a decision. And for the first time in years, I wasn't sure which side of the law I belonged to anymore. Dawn came pale and cold, the kind of light that don't forgive what it finds. The fire was out, and the desert smelled like smoke and endings. Martha was awake before me, sitting by the coals, quiet, her face turned east. The wind pulled at her hair, and for a second she didn't look like a killer or a widow, just someone waiting for judgment to arrive. Her husband's badge lay on the ground between us, bent, blackened, still catching the light in places. I picked it up, felt its edge cut into my thumb. That tiny sting said more than any preacher could. "How many men died for what this stands for?" I asked. She didn't look up. How many lived pretending it still mattered? I didn't have an answer. I'd spent years carrying paper warrants for men like me, telling myself justice had a price, and that I was just the one collecting it. I saddled the horse, packed what was left. The law in Bisbee would pay good for her, a clean bounty, enough to buy me a new start. or a better lie. I watched her sitting there, hands resting on her knees, not begging, not pleading, just waiting. She said, "You already know what you're going to do." And I hated her for being right. We rode slow, no words, just hoofbeats and wind. The trail back to Bisbee stretched empty and endless. Every mile felt like a verdict, every sound of the reins like a chain. I looked at her sometimes, the way she stared straight ahead, calm, proud, broken. I'd seen condemned men with more hope. At the ridge above the valley, Bisbee shimmered in the distance. That's when my gut turned. The closer we got, the less I believed in what I was doing. By the river crossing, I stopped. The horse snorted, restless. The water was low, shining like silver under the sun. She didn't ask why we halted. Didn't need to. We both knew this was the line. I looked at her, really looked. Not the widow, not the outlaw's friend. Just Martha Clay, a woman who'd done what no one else dared, and now carried the price like a scar. I told myself the law would take it from here, that my part was done. But something inside me whispered otherwise. And as she met my eyes, I knew the law wasn't the only thing I'd have to betray. The trail bent along the river, its water slow and brown, cutting through the desert like an old scar. Bisbee lay half a day ahead. The law, the gallows, the end of it all. We rode in silence. The wind carried the smell of smoke, maybe from Dry Creek, maybe from the memory of it. Martha didn't ask how far. She already knew what waited there, and what I intended to do. When the sun reached its highest, we stopped beneath a dry cottonwood. I handed her the canteen. She drank slow, then said, "You don't have to explain." I stared at the horizon, couldn't meet her eyes. She went on, "Men like you carry the law because they're afraid of carrying anything else." I wanted to argue, but she wasn't wrong. Every bounty, every name had been a way to avoid my own reflection. Until her. We crossed the shallows, hooves breaking the surface with dull thuds. On the other side, the land rose toward the Bisbee Road. That's where I stopped. She looked at me, puzzled. "What is it?" The air hung heavy between us. "I was supposed to take you in," I said. She nodded once, almost gently. "I know." The wind blew her hair across her face. She didn't brush it away, didn't beg, just waited as if she already knew what I was about to do. I climbed down, walked to her side. For the first time since I met her, I saw fear, not of dying, but of being understood. "You can still go back," she said. "I won't blame you." I shook my head. Too late for both of us. For a moment, the desert was silent. No wind, no birds. Just two broken souls standing between right and wrong. Then I kissed her. Not long, not soft. Just enough to say what neither of us could carry. When I pulled away, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "Go, Elias. Before you remember why you shouldn't." I mounted up. Didn't look back. Couldn't. The river glimmered behind me, and on the far bank she watched until I was nothing but a shadow in the heat. The badge lay heavy in my pocket. I thought of tossing it away, but some weights are meant to be carried. By the time the sun set, I was miles from her, but part of me never left that riverbank. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't chasing anyone. I was running from myself. The fire's small tonight, just enough to keep the cold from reaching my bones. Been years since Dry Creek. The desert took the rest, the names, the faces, the reasons. But some nights when the wind comes from the south, I still smell the smoke. And I remember her. They called me a bounty man once. Now I'm just a man. Turns out there's a difference. The law don't ride this far anymore. Maybe that's mercy. Maybe it's proof that the desert wins in the end. I never saw her again. Didn't expect to. Some stories aren't meant to circle back. But when the fire crackles just right, I swear I hear her voice. Soft, steady, telling me to keep riding. So I do. even if it's only in my head.